morning, everyone. Wish you our warmest welcome on this second webinar, Impacts and Possible Answers, content of COVID-19. Let me tell you about the development of this session. We are doing it through streaming Feminismes y LGTBI from Barcelona City Council. We have reporters from Barcelona, Madrid, and Vienna. The seminar will be held in Spanish. You will hear Ricarda Goet's presentation translated into Spanish. The Filadora will talk in Catalan. Some practical tips. This should be at the very beginning of the emission, so you can see the webinar from the very beginning. If you want to follow online, you have to drag it until the bar, which is bottom down. We will know about the reality from gender perspective. After the presentation of this study, we will give the floor to 3 speakers, and afterwards there will be a space for debate. Marca Marasa will share your answers and reflections that you can put on the YouTube chat. Thanks to all the colleagues and technical staff who are making this streaming possible. I'll give the floor for the opening session to Laura Perez, fourth Deputy Mayor of the Barcelona City Council. I wish you a nice webinar. Laura, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Sonia. Thanks to all the team that made it possible in spite of distance and this complicated momentum. Thanks for finding the tools so we can keep thinking about city and its subject. This webinar focused on impacts and possible responses on the COVID context from a gender perspective. I want to thank the management of Transversalitat, Gènere and time users. We want to deep on phenomenon of the city. There are some new challenges that can derive from the current reality, which has nothing to do with gentrification, but that can also be the pillar for gentrification subjects in the near future. The interest of capital funds to buy in a momentum of crisis as now plots, buildings, strategic areas of the Barcelona city can take us to some phenomena that be unprecedented. That would be the desertization of the center of the downtown Barcelona, Raval, Ciutat Vella, the Gothic area, and how this leads to some empty venues, the emptiness of streets when the shops are closed. So there are different phenomena that take place within the city. We wanted to dip in one of these phenomena much after this happened. In fact, gentrification term started to be visible and studied once the cities were already suffering the effects of gentrification. We are talking of processes, substitution of population with effects on the dynamics and the public space of our cities, non-willing and unwanted displacement, which are the characteristics of these displacements, which are the impacts on women and men, and the arrival of new populations who come to occupy this space emptied by the evicted population with common features. They have more power, they have more money. Could give you a practical example, such as Poble Sec, Costa Francs, in areas where the elder population, migrant populations, and people who are building the areas, these neighborhood fabrics. Suddenly, they see an ad on the internet saying that their flat will be luxury flats with increases of rentals that they will not be able to assume, so they would be evicted. Some practices of eviction practices, we have seen cases such as the one of Mega Premium. Unfortunately, there were several cases of whole buildings where the landowners were forcing people to get out of the building. The city council has to intervene. There were some processes of resistance by the public administration to access to housing, but we are talking of social relations, the trading fabric. This brings to loneliness of the elder when they are put out of their houses. They face huge troubles to remake their lives in a certain way. In fact, this survey wanted to analyze how a phenomenon such as gentrification is affecting women in the city. As many skeptical people, we could say that these phenomena are affecting the global society. It is a class view site, and the survey is showing to which extent the work we are completing from the Barcelona City Council. The survey is saying that the city is not gender neutral. The impact on women and men is different. Sexual division of work, the characteristics of employment for women, more precarious, discontinuous, the over-representation of people amongst the elder and in single-parent houses. So a huge part of gentrification have the women in the center, at the core of it. Women will be more vulnerable when displaced from their houses and neighborhoods. Gentrification is leading to a modification of the public space. We've seen, I wanted to give a second example. When there are proposals of pacification of the public space, improvements in the public space, sometimes after participatory processes, there is a fear. The residents are feared of these improvements because they consider that this can lead to a higher level of gentrification and evictions. There were some works to improve public space. They should be stopped and get modified because some people were fearing this improvement, that this improvement would lead to rising prices of the houses that would made unsustainable to keep. That's why it is very important to put some limits to the price increases and over speculation to protect such a fundamental right as the right to house. The commercial fabric, the association fabric, there is an impact on daily life of this residential population that has not been evicted. We are going to try to give an answer to these analyses that I wanted to show you, to share with you. That's why we are going to put on this session the issues of caregivers. I know that your mandate is that of doing a more feminist city, putting lives in the middle. We will have Maria Gabriela Navas, Marc Dalmau. They are researchers of OACU, of the Observatory of Anthropology of Urban Conflicts. They will tell us about the second survey about gentrification and gender. Maria Gabriela Navas, architect, doctor in social anthropology by the University of Barcelona. She's coordinating a research group of the Greeks at the University of Barcelona, and Marc Dalmau, sociologist and PhD in anthropology and urban society. You know many of these cases I was referring to in Sans Montjuïc, and he's part of OACU, Universitat de Barcelona. Work for social justice and social transformation. That's about amongst its specialties. We hope this session will be fruitful for you all and that we can share all these subjects to face all the challenges that we are facing in our city, in the cities in general. Thank you very much. Okay, so I will start myself. Thank you very much for your kind words, Laura. Thanks for inviting us to share the results of this survey, which was ordered by the Department of Diversitat de Gènere. It is very important to start talking about these subjects, to work in a transversal way so we can avoid these conflicts in the near future. Laura made the introduction of this context, but let's start with some theory as for the methodology. The other day, we could see the exhibition of the exposition of the Greeks, doing it from a gender perspective. Well, that's my subject. I love it. And we do not need to remind what gentrification is. That's the process of displacement of people, progressive substitution of autochthonous population in some neighborhoods with a higher income level inhabitants. A study from 1964, Ruth Glass, when she studied the transformation of this working class area. The phenomenon has been globalized and diversified and has led to many discussions and theoretic debates. This lack of consensus has brought the first methodological problem, its correct measurement and empiric knowledge. It is hard to know how to measure how these processes of displacement take place. From a minimum definition, any process of gentrification, there are two kinds of mobilities, the one of the capital, an important movement of investment or reinvestment coinciding with the cycles of economic accumulation, and an involuntary displacement of traditional residents. How does this affect to women? These processes, as Laura said, as recomposition of movements, they are leading to a transformation of the production realities. It doesn't affect the same women. Normally, poor women are the most evicted ones, And as for the classical analysis from feminist analysis about gentrification, we gave importance to causality. What is the role of women within this effect relationship? Normally, they were identified as either as agent, higher income people, and on the other hand, a social polarization as victims, poor women, many times from other countries, many of them elder, they are the main victims. At Poblenou, we try to build a system of indicators, we have called it SIGEN, and it started from these methodology ideas that tried to study this process of gentrification from a gender view. It's important not only to see how these processes, these gentrification processes affect women as well as lifestyles, as the condition of migrants or local people, etc. It is very important to study the causes, not only the effects and consequences of these processes. On the other hand, it is convenient to have a long-term view. These processes are not after 10 years of urban transformation, but after 40 or 50 years of urban transformation. It's very important. Normally, gentrification processes are coupled with a stage of previous degradation, which explains the process of revalorization of the territory. These processes of gentrification and desertification are united. They are the expressions of a new neoliberal urbanism, which is global and extended, and very quick to explain the indicators. There are several kinds of gentrification. The productive gentrification is different from the residential one or the commercial one, or through processes when there are new constructions, or the gentrification related to traditional housing, and the importance of the routing devices or mechanism which are territorializing these processes. I give the floor to Gabriela, who will tell us how we activated this system of indicators. Thank you very much. Yes, good morning. Thank you, Mark. Thanks to the City Hall for organizing this webinar, as well as the related associations. I will tell you about the indicators and the methodology. I will share my screen with you. All the SIGEN indicators, the system of gender impact and gentrification, is oriented to diagnosis and analysis of the social impacts derived from gentrification process on the territory from a cross-sectional perspective and with a gender approach. We study the consequences of this mercantilization process in the daily life of women. This indicator system was applied in El Poblenou with a study of urban transformations that have affected the sector. An analysis of the neighborhood implied or allowed to understand the urban reforms executed in the last years in the surrounding areas. We also revised all the social evolution, the historic evolutions of the and El Poblenou and its bordering areas. Second to the Poblenou, that's the number 68 that you can see on the screen, as well as the area of Parc and Layard Cuna, number 66, as a bordering area to be able to study on the ground and contrast these two areas that are facing huge real estate pressures in terms of sociability that were identified from the ethnographic approach. As for the structure and the methodology of SIGEN, SIGEN is researching on this additional context of gentrification, how the appropriation of capital in residential areas to accumulate values has had an incidence on the displacement of people due to the increase of urban income, also integrated by women who also operate as gentrificator operators. But the indicators on displacements, that is, those oriented to measure the level of resistance in front of urban violence and the perception of moving, of real estate moving, are just a system, a process oriented to detect symptomatic aspects of gentrification that could be identified in the affectations of commercial and social fabrics of an area. Second is oriented to appropriation of urban space, and these two main pillars are made by 9 subjects, and each subject has different indicators. The grouped axes as appropriation of urban space are diversity, proximity, and community comfort, and the axes of the part of production of the city are segregation, vulnerability, touristification, urban renewal, and displacements, as well as renovation of capital. That's why the displacement axis is incorporated, and the system understands this as something dynamic and complex. That's why it integrates other axes and indicators. The indicators have been analyzed from an ethnographic approach. They have a qualitative character that should be useful to monitorize the impacts of gender, gentrification, and local aspects that can explain the phenomenon, who are the results who might be a bit dark. So we could not study them otherwise. The measurement scale is putting the production of urban life in the center of analysis to identify symptomatic aspects to gentrification, according to the level of valorization of each indicator as for its level of impact, and in case women living in Poblenou, to identify the level of each of the indicators within each thematic axis. Collected qualitative data from ethnographic methods, from commented itineraries with women who lived from the very early age, from observation in the public area to identify some gender borders which are materialized in the use of space, and through workshops made with neighbors from the neighborhood, so to have their witness and to know the changes they observed in the commercial and daily dynamics of the area. The compilation of the data were done with techniques of registers to systematize this work, so we could shape the database, database to feed the system of indicators. The register of observation and itineraries were done through some files as observation guides to value in real time and on the ground the level of each indicator according to the spatial practices observed as well as the perceptions of the witnesses. Each indicator had a scale between 1 to 5, the 5 being the highest, and we extracted an average of each indicator to calibrate the data, the compiled data within these observation guides. We have the axis of diversity within this area. That's the guide of observation of this axis. And on the field, we could corresponding level at each indicator, and finally the value of each indicator was according to the symptom of gentrification that this implied. So the higher was the level registered as for the value of quality of urban life, the lower was the symptom of gentrification. We have another example with the proximity axis. That's the surveys that were distributed in the workshops, and the participants from 1 to 5, they were registering their answers, and there was an evaluation and assessment measure these results according to the impact of gentrification according to high level or middle level, middle and low. These are the indicators on the screen with the two main areas, each of them with 9 axes, and each axis with the indicators applied to each area with this measurement of gentrification according to whether it is high, medium, or low level. The measurement of qualitative indicators was obtained from the average of the registered results in surveys according to their incidence in the gentrification process. The scale proposed by the SIGEN according to this qualitative level measured between 1 and 5. All the analyses are cross-traveled by this feminist perspective. That's how we assessed each of the indicators. We have detected the symptoms of gentrification responding to a polarized criteria that is the care giving as a contradiction of the mercantilization process in an area leading to a gentrification process. The lower is the level register of each qualitative indicator, the higher will be the symptoms of gentrification. In other words, the measurement scale of the symptoms vis-à-vis the value of each indicator responds to this logic. The better urban life is, the less gentrification there is. Here we have the total results for each of the indicators for all the axes according to the identified symptoms. And the scope of this indicator system has a main objective to be able to monitorize the processes of gentrification in the areas. That's why the long-term scope regularly applied, it might allow to update this qualitative database. Each year, it could be updated so we could identify possible changes in the assessment of indicators. The qualitative database would also allow to detect the indicators that went from low or medium level symptoms to a higher symptoms level. All this would be to measure the networks, provision networks, and all these urban areas converted to circulation, to traffic, or just for trading. So that this task is possible, there are some urban management models that should change, that put on the center, put the focus on the main values of citizenship. I will give the floor to Marbach for the conclusion. Now, an area which is in danger due to gentrification. We are a bit lacking of time, and we have to give floor, space, and time to our colleagues who will have the floor afterwards. Basically, for those of you who want to see the survey, you will be able to do it. And after studying the development of the territory, the subject was why it had not been more gentrified from Via Olímpica, the Forum area, Diagonal Mar, the opening of Diagonal, the area of 22 Arroba, the 30 years of disinvestments, of disindustrialization between the 50s and the 80s. The initial question changed, and the final question was why the area of Poblenou was not more gentrified. The modern area of 22 Arroba, Al Parque La Llacuna, all the trends reinforced, and we can see that there is a productive gentrification, and gentrification due to new building, to build gentrification. The residential fabric is new and mixed a bit, combined, and one of the paradoxes of this survey that surprised us wasn't there more gentrification, and apart from a community life and social links still very active and intensive, what we have detected is that even if residential displacements are more women-oriented, the evictions, most of evicted people are women with kids at charge. There is a polarity because there are high level of income women who are getting to the area. We've seen how far these women were sensitive to these questions. The women that would be protagonizing these changes would get opposed to these trends. That's then a certain contradiction of this gentrification, and the conclusions of the study are the following ones. In spite of the threats and the urban change of 22 Arroba, with before and after in the urban governance of the city council, in spite of this, there are still solidarity networks of care and social reproduction that do not stop, but which are nuancing the effects of gentrification. This can't stop the projects, the social and urban projects of the area, but we've seen that it was important because it nuanced these processes of gentrification. Thank you very much to the OACU team for the explanation and the work undertaken. We're going to give the voice to the feminist women. You have the vindications about gentrification and gender. And another sector, another aspect is how this phenomena of gentrification is tackled. Are there feminist public policies in local governments to stop gentrification? Please keep on time. We are going to give the floor to the area of Lavapiés, dónde a space shared by people who do not feel this area as an area to defend but mutual cooperation from where we can draw a more fair daily life. The main trouble is speculation. After this touristification process identified in the last years, it has expulsed the citizens in the last years, as we also know in Barcelona. Maria López Codín Marisa has been working in Lavapiés and in the rest of Madrid and the rest of the state. She's doing this from feminism and anti-racism. You have the floor whenever you want. Okay, I hope you can hear me well. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to this webinar. I also want to thank the explanations through this investigation, because it is true that the surveys are giving data to a reality. Because we put names to resistance movements. I have a chronometer for this 10 minutes time. I wanted to present the space. It is a collective, the Espacio, which was born in 2007 when the gentrification process in Lavapiés, as well as in historic areas of European capitals such as Barcelona, it is quite similar. We called it touristification. That's a displacement of population which are replacing the local or autochthonous population. In 2007, we made a short report once the process was already advanced. We've been doing plenty of things, more surveys, reviews, conferences for the right to the city. We wanted to render it more visible so we can put more people on board for the self-defense of the area. The last action was Carnival Parade, the parade of the Sardine, before lockdown, the end of February. Another important thing for us was contributing to fostering all the networking processes of the area. I like how Raquel Gutiérrez Aguilar is posting it, a Mexican activist. She talks about a production which goes beyond these ethnocentric productions. We are very linked to other resistance spaces, in fight, on fight, and another workshop that we called a neighborhood trade union, where we group the living collectives or groups in the area. As I know, time flies, and this webinar is focused on gentrification and the link between gentrification and gender. I would like to explain how we think the relationship between touristification and feminism in reality. We think that this process is anti-feminist because you said it, because it attacks the material living condition of the poorest people, the more precarious people, and amongst them, in a highly represented proportion, we have the women, and the women, the poorest women. We're not talking of any or every women, the migrant with people with children at charge, and so on. There are three main pillars: an attack to the right of housing, an attack to labor conditions, and the destruction of the neighborhood networks, the right to housing. The notifications of eviction We have women on top with women who are fragile, trans women, or with children with them. They are the most affected, but they are the women who are the first line of the defense of this right to housing. I think that no one is a victim, but they are agents of change. Yes, we defend from Broques and Lucha many more women, but the women are meeting at the meetings. They are defending the right to housing to all population. As for labor conditions, touristification process is changing all this, mostly in Lavapiés. For example, what we do have is shops or sales of goods and services for these tourists. That means precarious employments. Women who work as cleaners of hotels or touristic apartments. The world of tourism in the touristic sector, as we know, doesn't distribute the wellness, and we know that the women are not victimized. They keep fighting as the Kellys, those who clean the apartments and the hotel rooms, how they are called. As for the relationships amongst the neighboring areas, it is breakdown. First, the affective relationships are broken. Also, the support networks, they also break the possibilities of getting organized to stop this process. They depolitize, or they put some breaks, some difficulties to these networks, and they are turning this life movement to nothing. Of course, when we are neighbors, we just cross one another, we meet one another on the terraces or the bars or the shops, because your neighbors, when they start being evicted or getting out, many things are broken in the areas. The support networks are also broken. This is more important because the life is organized another way. If you are very close, you can get organized to buy together, to share the care of children, children's wards, and all that. And this supports life during the lockdown period with this mutual network. This had to be done to sustain, to support these precarious lives. When people leave the collective Lavapiés, dónde, the people have to move from the area, but they even have to move to other cities or towns because it is too hard to live here because the city is hostile and too expensive. And this turning into vitrine. We were selling a brand of city, a label. What do downtown areas were selling multiculturality, and they sell rebellion, a young area. But who are the first evicted? These people who are getting organized in social centers that are evicted, as well as the migrants or racialized people. They are also the gypsies see people who are also evicted within these processes of gentrification and touristification. So it seems very important to me to point this out, how these areas, this brand is emptied of life. It is quite painful, but here we are. I don't know whether I have more time left. Otherwise, okay. What seems important to me to put on the table is this question that was raised by Laura Perez at the very beginning. With the pandemic, we realized that the ratio of resident people and people, sporadic people, there are very few people now. Now these areas are emptied with public spaces which are privatized, with terraces, with empty chairs and tables. So these areas are emptied, as I said, but with all the social drama, the employments falling, people with no opportunity to reverse this speculation model, which is unsustainable and which is undemocratic and which is destroying cities in the shape of an emptiness that I don't know how we are going to revert it, but we think that from Lavapiés on Debat we could initiate this journey to a better city, but I leave this for the discussion. Thank you very much, Marisa. Really interesting. We are seeing many questions about this. Julia y Angele, on behalf of Filadora, Feminist Assembly of Poblenou de Barcelona, lesbian, trans, and bisexual of Poblenou, a space of cares to share experiences against the heteropatriarchal and capitalist oppression, as well as other oppressions that the women can face, such as fascism or classism. The Filadora is working, so El Poblenou is a feminist area. Hello, we are Julia and Angela. We work at Filadora, and we were born in 2017 with the intention of creating a space of self-defense and resistance, feminist resistance, as well as generating content for the neighbors, the women neighbors. I'll tell you about the context of the area so you can understand better the current situation. Until the 60s, Poblenou was a humble area, separated from the city more than now, and since the 60s, degradation and disinvestment of the land started. The spaces were dirtier, social margination spaces. This phase lasted 30 years. The Villa Olímpica of the Poblenou was created on the occasion of the Olympic Games in 1992. The area is much more attractive. It is connected to the sea. The land prices rose by 50%. You have to think that until then, it was a textile and industrial area where most of the workers were minimum. It was not the peripheral area of Barcelona. The finalization of Diagonal, as Marc said, and the building of Fòrum de les Cultures. But the hugest change was that of 22@, the technology area, and basically the idea is to create a district with particular areas oriented to modernity. The idea of these buildings is that they are occupied by innovative companies of the digital sector. What happens with all that? Through this gentrification process, all the spaces, all the plots that had been abandoned in the last decade, they started to be allocated to uses that do not respond to the needs of the neighbors. Some housings are built that we can't occupy ourselves. What is the situation? The social fabric of the area is being destroyed. The neighbors of the country are evicted, and also from the spaces of socialization, such in Las Ramblas. 10 years ago, it was one of the main centers of socialization of the neighbors, but due to speculation, now there are plenty of terraces you cannot walk through, and the high prices of the venues make them unviable. So we have been evicted from the places. We are going to more peripheral spaces of Poblenou, and we cannot use this space as before. We are evicted from our houses through the creation of hotels, flats, which are allocated to touristic flats, as well as investment funds which speculate with the housings of Poblenou. All these make the eviction of our area. The young people, if they want to get independent, they are forced to live outside. As for the urban landscape, it is an amalgam areas which was abandoned and others who have been refurbished and are modern. There were plenty of these solars, of these plots that were occupied by the neighbors, the women neighbors of the area, to replace, to give an answer to the needs of neighbors. These spaces are being closed because these plots, the landowners want to use their plots and allocate them to other uses. An urban cultivation area which was created, that would be a new gentrificating process because it is a space that has not been thought so to be occupied by the neighbors, but for higher income level. Some of these areas are allocated to people with high rentals, with high income. When I came here, the surroundings, there were plenty of plots which were abandoned, and they were occupied by these urban gardens, after which those who were cultivating them were evicted, and now some luxury buildings have been built. So the landscape is changing very fast. The city is a patriarchal space because traditional urbanism was thought to give an answer to the masculine, to the men needs to go to work. So the women were excluded and were not taken into account when it came to plan the city and its work. Gentrification is worsening this exclusion sensation of feeling because the neighbors and the shops rooted in the area are substituted by empty plots, by empty buildings due to speculations, hotels, empty warehouses. So this feeling of unsafety and derouting augment. The women are more vulnerable to suffer from these negative effects of gentrification. And in the reality, we can see that this is so because our colleagues from the platform Ens Plantem, to avoid evictions, they say that many of the evicted are women, 90% are racialized, they have minors, so children under 18 with them, and this phenomenon is also repeated in the other areas of the territory. The women are those who need more help, who attend assemblies and who resist to gentrification and evictions. As Julia explained, that's the current situation in the area. We want to thank you for having invited us to participate into this roundtable. We would have appreciated that we would have been taken into account to make this survey, the survey you presented. And I also would like to launch a question. I will say it in Spanish and in English. Do we really know the cost of transforming Barcelona into a globalized and modern city? Thank you very much. Thank you all, Filadora. Yes, we take note of your comments. To close this virtual roundtable, we are very happy to have the Department of Women from the government of Vienna that we are following with particular attention. As for urbanism, gender, Ricarda Goetz is working in this department, who is responsible of the acogida houses, the houses of care, coordinating campaigns of sensibilization for the citizenship. She's been working for 5 years in the research area of the department, and she is the international representative coordinating the network of cities to facilitate the exchange of best practices between cities. You have the floor whenever you want, Ricarda. Thank you.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Sonia, and thank you to all my speakers before me and the invitation. I think it's really amazing, and thank you that I could have the translation. Very much needed. So yeah, I have a very different perspective now. First of all, yes, I'm also a researcher with data, so I appreciate the presentation of studies, of course, because I think data is very needed for the political area to make decisions based on actual facts. But as I am from the city, we also have a different approach. So Vienna is the same like Barcelona, which I think is very important, that we are more women than men. So I don't know how that works, that we are the majority and always treated as a minority. So I think first of all, we are the majority of our cities, you know, and it's also in Barcelona, same in Vienna. Women have higher life expectancies, so the elderly population is very, very female in that sense. But I have to say also Vienna's discourse on gentrification is still quite small, because there's a couple of reasons for that. I think we do quite well. First of all, we have a lot of social housing. So it's 24% of all the housing in Vienna is social. And there is different social housing. There is some for the very, very people with low income. They have the cheap housings. They're sometimes not the newest ones, but there's the new kind of housing that is socially supported. But of course, we have the other sectors, private owned sectors, private investments as well. Another reason why Vienna doesn't have that many problems with gentrification is we have The care services, they're quite available and spread out through the city. So I think that it's very smart not to create areas for things, but also spread it out. Third reason is, I think the really good public transport in Vienna makes people more flexible to move, because Vienna tries now, before they build a new area, they first create the subway, which I think is a very good approach, because it's not about a lot of evictions or something like that, but it's if you create new spaces, which is a good thing because it's modern housing, you also have to think about the infrastructure. You cannot just build and create areas where nobody can get to work from there. Thirdly, let's say there is definitely gentrification happening in some districts more than other. So Vienna has 23 districts, and I can tell you, you cannot afford to live in the first district. Nobody can. I don't know who can. So but this has always been the case, this classist case. There were always some districts, they were kind of reserved for rich people, let's say it how it is. But I think what we do well is, because there is social housings in every district, and if a new district gets a new renewal process, the city of Vienna demands that not, let's say there's 10 buildings being built, you cannot build 10 private owned buildings. It's not possible. So there's at least, there has to be a mixture. And I really love the introduction from Laura Paris, that she said, the city is not gender neutral, which is a very important point, that a lot of people think that, oh, we all walk on the streets, it has to be so equal. But the thing is, as studies have shown, as you all might know, the movements of men and women are very, very different. And also what the needs are. So for example, in Vienna, a lot of men drive by car to work, women take the subways. And we have a very good expert. She couldn't be here today, unfortunately. Her name is Eva Keil, and she has been working in this topic since 1991. 1991, who does the city belong to? Already in 1991. And she at first was, of course, criticized a lot. Come on, what do you want? Pink sideways? Yes, of course, this is all we want, pink sideways. But since then, the city of Vienna created a renewal process with involving the public, which is still happening. We have an app where when you see areas where you might tell the city something, they have to react as well. So what Eva Keil changed her work was the awareness. First of all, it's very important that the cities or also the building areas have this awareness that what they build will affect women and men and children and elderly differently. So what the city of Vienna changed the last 20, 30 years was the lighting. So you won't have like dark spots in Vienna where you cannot go. All the subways have elevators and good lighting. We changed areas like cemeteries, where a lot of women are, actually way more than men, and the cemeteries didn't have toilets and didn't have benches. So it is kind of a process where the city tries to involve the people that actually use a space. With that in mind, of course, we do have this kind of soft gentrification. So the rents have been going up, and yesterday when I heard your first session, it was said that women spend about 40% of their income on housing. This is the same in Vienna, and men spend about 30% because still of gender pay gap, because still, if you're a single mother, how can you afford 3 rooms if you have 3 children? Or even 2 or 4 rooms? It's not possible. Yeah. So we have a lot of support for that. We have kind of the grassroots organizations that try to always make women and their needs heard. We have different women living projects, But what we as a city also do, which is very important, my colleagues from the planning sectors do that. As soon as Vienna starts to plan a new area or wants to renew something, they have to include the people that already live there. So evictions are not the case in the beginning, of course, because we have very strong laws protecting the renters, which is good. But of course, the rents go up, and then the people that maybe lived there before cannot afford to live there anymore. So what we kind of created, and what we hope goes on, and maybe for Barcelona as well, we created a gender-sensitive city planning manual, which is available in English. I can share the link here as well, which is very basic manual. I think just to, if anything is started new, you cannot just focus like, like one track. You have to take into account the movements and the time studies of other people, and not only, of course, the men with able bodies that can move in the city with their cars. So we also have the gender equality monitors. I'm really interested in the of course, quantitative data. We have 12 topics with 120 indicators that the third one is being done right now. So if you're interested in that, I'm sure there could be a separate discussion about like how can you provide the politics with good data so they can prove that you have to take women into account. It's nothing special, it's nothing luxury, you have to. It's not a discussion anymore, I think. And the resistance we've seen from Vienna since the 1970s is sometimes people even occupy houses just to make the city policies heard. So I think the awareness, the involvement of women, but of course, the city has a lot of responsible for its inhabitants, and we cannot expect people to pay that many taxes without taking them into account. So yeah, I'm looking forward to your questions now maybe, and then I can share the manual and maybe the short summary of the gender equality monitoring report if you are interested in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ricarda, for telling us about the situation in Vienna and how you are working. Thank you all for sticking to time. We're going to open the time for debate after these first questions that we have been receiving. Marisa, directly with you, there are several questions. A first block, perhaps addressed to you, and other questions to the other reporters. The first question would be, you were saying that desertization of the areas of the downtowns. I'd like to know your opinion about what should be done in this post-COVID-19 situation. What should be done with these centers? Another question to Marisa from Esther Crusellas. How could we manage so that the incoming women are involved in the maintaining of the neighborhood networks? In Lavapiés also we can see diversity, but do you think that at the same time gentrification is a way of destroying city? And last but not least, Marisa, with regards to social networks, do you think that there are social networks between traditional residents of the area and those of higher status? Thank you very much. Well, there are many questions. You will tell me when it's time. What about the radicalization of areas? First of all, in a negative way, not implementing public policies that put the focus on speculation instead of other processes. As the colleagues from Filadora said, the gentrification processes come from a long time ago. It was a degraded and abandoned area by the public policies and very poor. With the refurbishment plan in 1998, that was like a sort of miracle. We will get rid of these unlighted areas. We deserve to live in a living area with safety, not of the police, but with better living conditions. But I give this as an example, as the colleagues said, what is the cost that Barcelona turns into a global city? Well, these public policies had a huge impact. There is money to first the housing, and 60% of the money is public money. This money that I will use to refurbish the building, because they will be able to have an elevator to paint the facade or whatever. After 5 years, you can sell your house at market price, but mainly it's an expropriation of public money to the benefit of the private sector. Because if you refurbish a housing with public money and you sell it to market price 5 years ago, what's going on? These public policies should change the model and not be speculative. Otherwise, these are birds that are sold outright. As for positive policies, making the most of these changes, I think we should move to a more diversified economy in a more cooperative way, so they are not allocated to tourism, or at least not exclusively. We have to see how we can bring financial support to these projects of resocialization. The right to housing has to be real. In Catalonia, you just regulated the rental prices. I do congratulate you if your park of public housing is accessible to everyone. You will limit the evictions. There must be a public housing park like in Vienna. We have to stop the evictions, absolutely stop the evictions until we do not have this park of public houses available. In Catalonia, you are getting these measures step by step, but I can tell you that that's not the case in Madrid. The access to an income, to a minimum income, that's the universal basic income. I think this would be another way to redistribute the wealthness. Otherwise, we would have this increase in the working poor category or field. Well, that was about the first question. I think that women who come to work, we are crossing one another in some areas. Some people are getting to the neighborhoods, but we have to say that the people who come to work from other areas, they are getting involved in their own areas. The fight for housing is a diverse space. There are gypsy women, migrant women, other people. Do they mix with people with higher incomes? Yes, because we have middle-class women who are also coming, and I think that this mixture is good. There is a political effect, so people are getting involved by what happens to themselves and to their neighbors. And a last question that I couldn't note, I didn't have time enough, maybe, Ivan Muri, when the COVID crisis started, well, the fall of tourism, someone said that it was such as the Lehman Brothers crisis in 2009, 2012. It's a huge crisis. We could keep sinking, but the main landowners, investment funds are still buying to refurbish and to sell at higher prices afterwards. How can we stop this? Since we have questions to other colleagues, let's move to others. Gina Monge is asking, in particular to the colleagues of Filadora, which are your proposals under the current situations? Which would be your proposals? Well, we are still on training. In spite of this, we propose that this our cross-cutting work field is gentrification. We can see clearly all what is related to collective spaces, such as these urban gardens, some spaces where youngsters go, they are self-managed. Amongst the main proposals, they would be more linked so that we stop speculating with these plots. And another question that would be revising these hot spots, these streets where there is no one in the night. I come back late in the night and I don't feel safe. I think these safety measures should be revised, such as street lighting and others. And also another example is about the self-management spaces for the youngsters. I mean, we do not have these infrastructures, even though we are requiring them, we are demanding them. There is a space of Casal de Joves de Poblenou, which is called the càrrec, which is self-managed by young people of Poblenou. It was an old manufacturing site which was allocated to this group of young people. Part of it was being destroyed in the last decade, and it was not being recovered. It was almost collapsing, and it has been just now that, thanks to some organizations, it is being refurbished. But we still have to see to which use it will be allocated. We are claiming it as a self-management of youngsters. We hope it will be totally refurbished and we will be able to use it. This line of dialogue with the City Council should be open because we think we have some contributions to do. We will start talking with the women neighbors of the the area, and for next year we are available for any question you might wish. Thank you very much. Thank you. We take the words. We have a couple of questions to Ricarda. The first one by Conchita Diaz. She says that Barcelona is making huge efforts to increase the public housing park. What can be done? What can we do to move forward to have more public housings? And Mario is asking you how you work with the data, with the available data. Can you explain a little bit more about the guide, the guidelines that you told us about? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So as I am not working in the housing sector, I'm not really sure how I can suggest another city having more, because I know that there are very strong laws in Vienna. So for example, if you refurbish or renovate a building that is built before 1945, there's a different law applying. So there's different laws applying to anything. But of course, I think there was now an EU-wide demand for more public housing, because a lot of people come to Vienna and try to learn that. But as I said, I think it's politics. So if the city of Barcelona says, we will create this new area, or we make this area new, of course, it's politics not to give it only to the highest bidding, highest selling private owners. So yes, there must be the political will to have a diversified area if it's being new or if it's being renewed. The second question with data available, I think it's very interesting that the question was posed like that, because what we really try to do sometimes, of course, create new data, which we do now with women with handicaps, because we want more data what women with handicaps need in Vienna. But what the gender monitor does, it takes the existing data from public transport, the police, every data that is existing, and looks at women and men. And then the results, we push back to the experts responsible. So if the data tells me, okay, women feel not safe in this district, then we will talk to this district and say, you have to do something. You have to little lighting, your corners, sometimes even a mirror helps. So we have a lot of mirrors as well, so that you can look before going to a corner. The guideline that I shared now with the link, I think it will be available to everyone. It's in English as well. That was done by a lot of city planning expert and gender expert, what is needed in a city. And I think what I always say is like 4 things. We have the right to be seen. We have the right to be involved. We have the right to the same kind of resources. And we have the right to have the spatial representation. So the city of Vienna started now to name all new cities after women, because almost no street was named after women. And it has to do something with representation. It has to do something that we need the data. For example, I think a very good study is the time and movement studies. You really look, what kind of movements do men and women in different age groups have? Are they only staying in this area of the city? Are they moving a lot? What would they need? And of course, you need to have public fora. You need to invite the people that use the space. For example, the city of Vienna now changed a really, really big spot, Räumannplatz, where a lot of transport comes. And there's a lot of elderly men playing cards and drinking. There's a lot of young girls hanging out. There's a lot of dates happening there. So what the city did, they invited all these groups that are at this place and asked them, what do you need before we recreate this park? And I think this is what we all have to learn, is like we have to involve like like Filadora said, we have to involve the people that actually live there. We have to ask what they need. If we need benches, we will have money for benches. I think that's the political that has to be there. And it is a lot of time to involve the public, but it pays off.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Now we still have a couple of minutes left for a very last questions to OACU colleagues. Mark and Gabriela, you were saying before that many of the women after gentrification are very sensitive to the fights or the social reality of the area. And how could we ally them in this fight against gentrification and the maintenance of these networks? Any of you two? How can we involve people? Well, in many cases, the women are involved, and this sensitiveness lead them to the area. That's why, more than this aspect that seems very important to me, I think we have to listen to what all our colleagues are saying. It is a holistic matter. Everything is binded and cross-dependent. It is useless to work in just a partial area. We have to dare to decide, to be very decided, to bet on this. We need a common strategic front. There is a space devoted to gentrification and gender where there are not these projects devoted to that. So let's make front commun. We have to change the social and economic model, which is the urban model promoted by this city council that theoretically is sensitive to this subject. The only thing we see so far is how the 22 arroba is trying to work about and on the community, but not as for putting care on the center, but they try to extract talent and value of innovation, as they call it. So, but we have to bet, as Marisa said, on cooperation and social economy and solidarity economy. Only with this we are going to reverse this socio-economic model. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your contributions, your participation. Thanks to our reporters. Thanks for your proposals. All together, we would love to participate. We are getting to the end of this second webinar on gentrification and gender. Janet Sanz apologizes because she couldn't attend. So I will be very brief. The plan for the justice has to generate the main tool of this city council for the development of this gender equality. And we are about to start this assessment. Amongst the main axes within the ecology and urban space, we have the goal of tackling actions against gentrification from a gender perspective. With these two researches that we presented in these two webinars, we could contribute at least to make visible the impact of gentrification in women's lives. These studies, which are available on the website, the complete version as well as the compacted one, since right now we think that they help to enlarge the knowledge about gentrification, showing the fights and feminist strategies that tried to face this problem and which are absolutely crucial. We wanted to bring some light to this phenomenon which has been scarcely studied, and now we have the duty to give an answer to the challenges, to meet these challenges that you perfectly identified today. We have to implement public actions to stop this gentrification process, to work in the areas where the people are not evicted and people can live in plenitude, their plenty life. Thank you very much.